Okay. So coming back into Capture One, we're going to start pretty much from the beginning. Some of you guys may know some of this stuff. Some of you guys may not know some of this stuff. So I just want to take, we're going to have a quick conversation about this. I'm going to assume that you know nothing. This goes pretty quick, and I'm sure that we will get to the part where it's going to become challenging to anybody who's in here. So if you already know this stuff, just bear with me. We'll get it to be a whole lot more confusing for you in just a second. So if you look at the top of the screen right here, this area that I'm looking at right here, these things are actually called tool tabs. So for instance, this first one is called the library. The second one is the camera tool tab. And you can see when you click on this guy that you get this drop-down menu that happens underneath it, this drop-down series of palettes. These things that are underneath it are actually called tools. Now there is a difference between tool tab, which is what this thing is up here, and the actual tools that it holds it. And the reason I point that out to you is that, for instance, if you come over here, if you click on any one of these, if you hold down your control key, now if you've got a right-handed mouse, this would be called a right click. You could actually just click on the right button of your mouse. That doesn't happen in a lot of Macintosh settings. So for instance, in these screens right now, there may be a gesture now using touchpads that gives you the equivalent of a right click. If it is, what is it? Is it 2 fingers down? If I hold, anyway, that doesn't seem to be working for me, but anyway, the control key will always work for you to give you a right click. So if you hold down the control key, it is the key on the bottom row of your keyboard. It's not the one just to the left of the space bar. That is the command key. It's not the one just to the left of that. That is the option key. It's the one just to the left of that called the control key. If you hold that guy down and click on one of these tool tabs, you will actually see that you get a flyout menu that allows you to add tools, to remove tools, to add tool tabs, to remove tool tabs, or to remove this actual tab itself. Now I happen to click on the batch tab, and that's why this is called remove batch tab. If I came over here to the camera one and clicked on this, I could remove the camera tab. You guys sort of see how this whole part goes. So just to give you, I'm just trying to make the distinction now between tools and tool tabs. We're going to customize all of this in just a second. So at any rate, that's that whole part right here. In the way that we're actually looking at our screen right now, this is the default setup for Photoshop. Listen to me, this is gonna be a long day. For C1 Pro. And the way this actually works is that you basically got all your tool tabs that sit on the left-hand side. That you've got then the viewer, that's what this area is actually called right here. This is where all of your images would actually, the big version of your image would show up. And then finally down here, this thing down here is actually called the browser. So I want to actually, let's see how we can do this. I want to actually work with some files here. I want to do a sort of, yeah, I actually want to work with some files here. So I'm going to change this around in just a sec. I'll change it around. No, let's get the files in first. All right, so the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to actually import some files. Yeah, this is sort of going out of order, but I think it's important that we actually have something to work with here that we can see. So I'm going to go back into the library. First step that we're going to actually do here, and I'm going to actually import some files. But what you need to realize here is that the session that we've actually got active, the one that's got going, that we have going right here, is actually session number 3. So as we went through that whole naming process, that was great to set up all of our folder structure, but just realize at the end of that process that you've got your last shot of the day is what is active. So to get back to the first session, which is what we would logically do, you click on this drop-down menu and you simply come back to this session, Fashion 1, right here. Is that? Say what?
Yeah, it is in the other folders.
It just has the one and then a line just clear. It doesn't have the other.
Okay, then if you click on your drop-down window, how many windows are at the very bottom of this? Just one, huh?
Yeah. I just have one there, but I have all three in
What other way?
the first way.
Oh, in the Finder.
No, I have three here. And then the window.
Oh yeah, that's the way it should be. But when you're drop down here, you've got all three, and then your drop down. How bizarre. Okay, that's okay. No, there's another way to get to it. There's another way to get to it. Okay, so to get to it, if that has happened to you, that shouldn't have happened to you, but if that did, go back into the Finder, go to your Pictures folder, go to the folder that we had created, the parent folder, click on, do you have all three sessions there? Okay, so in all three sessions there, this is actually another way to simply load stuff. Click on the session number 1. You will see inside this that you again have this preference folder, preference file. This is how you would also launch if somebody just handed you a hard drive that this stuff hadn't been made, the way you would actually launch this guy. If you simply double click on that preference file, you will go back into Camera Raw and you should have now in that sessions drop down menu, it should have shot number 1. Are you good now? Okay, I'm going to save importing files for something later, but I need to get some images in here really quickly. So let's go back into the Finder. We're simply going to copy some images in there. So this is a good habit to get into. So when you guys do copy, when you're trying to copy files from one place to another, does it matter where your windows are on your screen? Or is it just you find the source and the destination and you do it? I think that that's a bad habit is what I'm trying to say here. So this is how I do it. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say hi to everybody else. I've actually got one window that's right here. I've got another window that's actually behind it. And this is what I do. Copying for me always starts at the top and works its way down. It never goes in the other direction. So for instance, I could find the files. I'm going to try and get 2 windows up. If you do not have a second window up, or if you have no windows up at all, simply hit Command N. It'll give you a brand new window. And arrange them so that you can see 2 windows here, so that you've got basically a window to copy from and basically a window to copy to. So what I'm saying to you is this. I'm going to actually find those files that I actually just gave you. Inside these working files. Yeah, that part will work. What I'm saying to you is this, that right now, if I wanted, these are the ones that actually, the files that I want to work with. I'll show you which ones we're going to talk about in just a second, which ones to get. But in this case, I've actually got my sources at the bottom. I would actually copy these guys and drag it up here into this capture folder. I do not want you to do that. You should get in the habit of always copying in one direction. Now, if you want to copy in that direction, that's fine, but then you should always copy in that direction. The reason I bring this up is that sometimes this can get confusing, and if you inadvertently copy into the wrong place, you can overwrite files that were never meant to be overwritten. You can do a lot of damage, and I don't want that to actually happen here. So in our case, what I'm actually going to ask you to do is this. I'm going to do just the opposite of this. I'm going to actually find my pictures folder at the bottom, and I'm going to find the shooting that we're talking about right now in session 1. The capture folder is where you want to put these files. So then I'm going to find my source in the top in version 9 and 6. The working files folder that I just asked you guys to do. And I think the ones that I'm going to ask you to bring in, yeah, no, let's not do that one. Let's not do that one. Yeah, we can do this one. There's one in here. There's one in here called Pervert Color Card. Inside that, you'll see a P45IQ folder. If you click on that, there's another folder in here called 100428_ENG_LING. Do you guys see that? Yeah, what would that tell you guys? Can you tell me anything about this? these files at all? Say what? It's a lingerie shoot. Can you tell me when it was shot? See, it used to be in my old naming convention, I didn't put in the 20, so it gets a little confusing, right? So that's why I always put in the 20 now. Yeah, but this was actually shot in April of 2010 on the 28th. I did it for myself, and it should be lingerie. So if we open this thing up and it isn't, I'm going to be upset. So at any rate, I want to copy all of these files. I don't want to move them. I want to copy them. So select the very one at the top. Scroll down to the bottom. You do not need to include this Capture One folder. Actually, though, so that you know what's in this Capture One folder are, if you click on it at the very bottom, what's actually inside this thing, this is where all the metadata is kept. Now, you guys know typically if you do, if you open a RAW file in Adobe Camera Raw and you do something to it, you process it in Camera Raw, whatever, it generates what they call an XMP file. And that's a separate file that sits right next to your RAW file. And it's all the processing instructions, right? There's a different way that Capture One does it, and this is the different way. They not only, they don't keep them next to each other, they put them out here into this, out here in these series of folders. This thing will always be together in here. You'll have, in here in the cache, you'll have what they call proxies. These are actually all the previews. Now, you don't need to keep these together. If you copy these without copying this major folder into the Capture One, it will rebuild all of that the minute you go into Capture One. So just so you know, you can copy it over, but you do not have to. In our case, I'm just going to, we can copy it over. I'm just going to select everything in this group. So if you come into this window, select the very top one, hit Command A, will select all of the rest of them. If you cannot remember that, simply select the top one. Scroll down to the bottom, hold down the Shift key, and click the bottom one, and you will get all of them selected. Then when you drag this over to the next space, you will see, in my case, don't let go. Just drag it over there, but don't let go yet. You will see that there's a little 20 in a circle. That is an indicator that I'm actually moving 20 files. However, I want to copy these. I do not want to move them. I want to copy them. I want to leave the set in its original place, and I want to make a new set here in this new folder. In order to do that, you add the Option key, and you will now see this little plus sign is next to the little red. And now when you let go, it will copy those files into your Capture folder. And it says it can't be because within the name settings something already exists. I'm just going to say OK and not worry about it. Then I'm going to go back into Capture One. And you should see nothing. Is anybody seeing any files yet? Any previews, any thumbnails? Nobody is, right? The reason you are not seeing these is that you need to activate the Capture folder. You need to click on this Capture folder, and all of a sudden, all the thumbnails will be visible to you. So this is something that trips up people all the time. They come into here, and there is no folder that has been selected to be viewed, and that is your problem. So for instance, if you click on Selects, you don't see anything in the thumbnails because there aren't anything in the Selects folder. So you should have these guys sitting in your folder right now. Does everybody have these? Anybody not have these? Okay. Okay, so you should see these guys right now. So we're going to change things up in the way our screens actually look and how we pretty much set up Camera Raw in the very beginning. So the first thing, Camera Raw, Capture One. Okay, the first thing we're actually going to do is change this. So for me, for instance, if you click on one of these images, you see it inside the viewer. This is actually a Columbia student graduate that assisted me for a while. He now actually lives in New York, and he's the first assistant for a British photographer who shoots for Vogue, and he travels all over the world. He's got the life that you want. He makes a whole lot of money. He's incredibly well connected. Yeah, he's got a great life. His name's Andrew. Anyway, he was really Anyway, good guy, brilliant. He stayed with the game. He knew his stuff. He still worked really hard at it. But anyway, that's who this is. But anyway, I want to change this because right now this seems to me to be a waste of screen real estate. So the first thing I'm going to do is change where the browser is. If I can get the browser off to the right-hand side, that will actually allow for a larger viewer window. Now, I shoot people. Most of the stuff that I shoot is vertical. If you were working for a photographer or yourself and you do primarily landscapes, you might be better off keeping it in this view right here because you would end up with a larger viewer area for landscape. But since I shoot vertical like this, we're going to change this. To move this, you come up to the view menu. I need everybody to do everything that I'm doing now. I need you guys to do. I need you to practice this stuff. I need you to see how this works. So I need this to actually, this is the whole participation part. So up to the view menu, down to place browser on the right. And when you do this, this thing will kick over and you will actually see that, yes, indeed, I ended up getting a larger browser here. If you want your viewer to be larger, even larger still, there's a certain amount of leeway that you've actually got. You'll see when you hit the limit. If you hover your mouse at the space between the tool tab pane right here and the viewer pane, you will get a double-headed arrow. If you click that double-headed arrow and move it to the left, again, it'll only go so far, but you'll see when you do actually do that, that your screen actually gets a little bit, your viewer actually gets a little bit larger right now, which is exactly what I want. If you want to go back to the way it was before, you can come up to the view menu and you will now see that place browser has been changed from right to below. And so in that case, you would click on place it below and it'll actually go back. Although in that case, I'm going to leave it exactly where it is. So in our browser, we've got a number of options here in the browser. You will see that if you hover your mouse over this guy as well, you have a series, you get the double-headed arrow again. And you will see in this guy, as you click and drag it to the right, it will actually make your images a little bit smaller. Now, in my case, if you drag in this direction, do you guys get multiple images like this? If you drag far enough? Okay, I just want to make sure. And as you continue to drag this way, your thumbnails will get bigger. You reach a limit on this where you can't get them any bigger, but I'll show you another trick in just a second. But anyway, if you drag all the way to the right like this makes your thumbnails as small as they can be. And in this case now, this viewer is the largest that it can actually be in my setup. Now again, my setup on my screen is being adjusted so that it ends up being full frame on this projector. But that's actually what's going on here. There's a couple of options that you can do now for how you actually view your browser. And in viewing the browser, those options are here in this drop-down menu. It's this little eyeball right here. If you click on that, you'll get a drop-down menu, and you will see by default, this first thing is actually set up. And what this first thing, the first icon here is set up to really do is to actually show you your browser, it treats your browser like a contact sheet. So you will see that if you click and you drag in this direction, that you start getting, there's two of these guys right now. If you continue to drag over, I can't get any more over here. But if I had a larger screen real estate, the more I drag over whatever, the more images that I would see in any given row. However, if you click this eyeball again and you go to the middle setting right here, it changes the way your browser looks. And what you end up in your browser, the way your browser looks right now, is it's actually going to give you all sorts of metadata underneath it, or across from it. Now, again, if you click and drag this out, you can see some of the metadata that is actually being shown to you. Some of it you don't see. This is really not the best view to actually be doing this, but there are reasons to actually use this sort of setup right here. But what you'll find is that if you want to work with this setup, in all likelihood, you're better off dropping this browser back underneath on the bottom, and you'll see why right now. So everybody, back up to the view menu again, come down to place browser below, and you'll actually see now what you get. It gives you all of this information. So it gives you your rating, it gives you your ISO, the aperture it was shot at, shutter speed, other information in here, what lens this was actually shot as. As you scroll over, it'll give you the date. So that's basically what's going on here. Now, some people find this incredibly helpful in terms of being able to look at small thumbnails that they've got and a huge amount of information that they can get about this stuff right now. However, this would be probably more specific for, again, if you were actually trying to do some organization or you were specifically looking for something. This would not be something, I wouldn't be shooting tethered using this mode. If you place your browser, again, back to the right, so up to the view menu, and again, place browser on the right-hand side. There's a third thing that you can actually pick, and it's this one, the third little icon. So I've clicked on the eyeball, and this third icon, and what the third icon does is this. It will actually make your thumbnails, it will put them in a single row. No matter how much you drag this thing over, it will stay only a single row. Your thumbnails just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So you'll see it'll change dynamically. So if I, again, click in this space between these two to drag this to get smaller, you'll see that before, when I drug this thing all the way to the left like this, I actually ended up with 2 images going across. This will always, that final one will always keep this as a single, just a single image here. Most of the people that I know, this is how they work, is set up like this. They keep all of this stuff in a single row. They get their viewer as big as they can actually get it like this. And we're good to go as far as this part goes. Does this make sense to everybody? You can actually get your window even slightly, your viewer window slightly larger by coming up to the view menu and coming down to hide. Where is hide? Oh, browser labels, right here. Under browser labels, but I'm not looking for browser labels. I'm looking for the viewer labels. I'll find it in a second. At any rate, so the next thing we can do here is, let's say that you strictly want to do editing. You don't really want to look at this viewer at all. You want to actually be looking at essentially a contact sheet. To do that, you come up to the view menu and you come down and you do hide viewer. And the viewer actually goes away, and now you've actually got maximum amount of screen real estate to actually go through and look at your images in a more contact sheet orientation. To bring that back, you come back up to show viewer. You can do the opposite of that trick. You can actually hide the browser as well. It gets rid of that guy. It makes navigation somewhat difficult. But nonetheless, it gets rid of that guy. Again, if you were shooting tethered, there's a possibility that you would only want big screen to be looking at this. A lot of times when I work with most of the digital techs that I work with, when they're actually showing, we actually work in multi-screen environments. So you've got one screen that the digital tech will be working on. You've got a separate screen that will be that an art director will be looking at. And in the case of Shock right now, they do a third screen that's for the photographer and a fourth screen that's for the stylist. And they show everybody different things. So for instance, there is no reason to show your art director your tool palette over here, and probably not the browser. The only thing they're really interested in is seeing the images as they come in. So in that case, you would do the screen setup for them. You would actually hide the browser. You can also hide the tools. So again, up to the view menu, down to hide tools. And this is the screen that you would actually give to the art director to be looking at this. In my case, as a photographer, this is what I look at as well. I don't need to look at any of the other stuff. To bring all of that back, simply up to the view menu again and come down to show the browser, and then back again up to the view menu again and come down to show the tools. And so that is in the browser view options. Never mind. I'm not going to go there. Okay. So sort of working around the rest of this, just to talk about this browser window really quick. If you click on the double-headed arrow that's on top of the browser window, you will see that you get a drop-down menu. This drop-down menu actually allows you to sort the browser depending on any of these criteria right here. So you can see you can sort it by name, by date, by the rating, color tagging, lenses, ISOs, any of this stuff you can actually sort this by. Now, in my case, I'm going to click on the little eyeball. I'm going to go back to the original multi version of this, so more the contact sheet version. Again, I'm going to click out of that to get rid of the flyout menu. I'm going to drag this to the side so that I've got two guys going like this. You can see on this drop-down menu that you can, again, do by name or by date or any of that kind of stuff. I'm going to click on date. Sometimes, and this is just a problem that happens with Capture One. Capture One is not the cleanest, most elegant software that was ever been written. There are problems that can show up with this guy, and one of the problems is this, is that you think that when you were shooting that your naming convention was set up correctly, and that that the program itself is actually numbering your frames. So you start with frame 1, and then frame 2, and then frame 3, and then frame 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and on, so like that. And by theory, if you do a sort then by name, they should be in the order that you actually shot it. Sometimes that does not happen. When that does not happen, there's no explanation for that. It's something wrong with the program. The names are correct, but they're not doing it in the order that you expect them to be in. If that is an issue for you, do a sort by date. It will remember that one image was shot after this one, and the next one was shot. And it will then give you the order that you were actually shot in. You have the option of also reversing that order. So if you click on this reverse order button, you will see that what I have up at the top now are the very final images that I shot, not the ones that I started with. If you again come back to this drop-down menu and go back to, and you'll see that instead of having a check mark next to it, it'll actually have the reverse will be check marked, and you'll get this little knock that's right next to date. So this is telling me I'm doing reverse order by date. If you click on name, this is now, it goes back to the normal version of that. And again, if I click on reverse order, this is now reverse order by name. So that's not been a problem with this shooting, but I'm just telling you that is a possibility that that part can actually happen. So that's actually what's going on here. In my case, I'm going to actually unset that, so I've got my normal guys right here. You will also notice on this drop-down menu at the very bottom that you have manual. You do not have to pick manual in order to sort these things manually. And what sorting manually means is this, and you guys can actually do this. Grab this top file and simply drag it down to a new place. And you will see I have now reordered this manually. This is no longer being ordered by name. You can see I can move this guy up to the top. You can move all of these around. When that happens, by default, manual will be selected for you. If that doesn't work for you, or you need to get back to where things work normal, go back up to name, and it will resort things. It'll put everything back in its space. But this becomes an important issue for you guys to be able to move stuff around, so that, for instance, if an art director only wanted to see a certain set of pics right here, you could actually move them up here into the top. Make sense? Okay. So back to the toolbar, this thing up here. What a lot of photographers will do is this. This is not all the tools that are possible up here, but this is a fair number of them. A lot of people find that this can actually be really, really, really confusing. There's too many things in here. As a matter of fact, in my case, I can't even see all the things that are in my toolbar, in this bar right here. It's because I have narrowed my screen down, this part of my screen, too much. So in order to see what's missing, it's these little double arrows that are right up here. If you click on it, output and batch are two commands. They are two of the tool tabs that I cannot see right now. If I move my screen real estate over, though, which I'm going to do right now, and I can then move this guy over, you can see that I can actually see the two that were hidden to me right now. However, in our case, we are going to get rid of some of these. And the first one that we're going to probably get rid of, you might possibly, I typically would always keep processing. This is processing and batch processing right here. We will go through every single one of these before this class is over. So just for the time being, if you don't know that, don't worry about this. We will come back to these guys. This next guy over right here is the metadata. You see, if you hover your mouse over it, that it will give you a readout and tell you what it is. It also gives you the keyboard shortcut to reorder these things. So for instance, if you wanted the metadata right here to be closer to the camera tab, if you hover over this guy again, you'll see if you simply click on it and try to drag it over, nothing will happen. But if you add the option key to it, or the command key, it's the command key, isn't it? Command key. So hold down the command key, click. You can now move this guy over and put it next to the camera guy. I'm going to bring it back because that's not what I want to do, but I just want to show you guys that this stuff is all movable. The next one over, so I'm going to leave these first three. The next guy over is actually styles and presets and adjustments. So in this case, I am not going to, we're going to set up your this Capture One right now to actually shoot. That's what we're going to do with this guy. So I don't need these for my actual shooting. This would be stuff that I would actually be doing more for processing my file. So I'm going to get rid of this guy. To actually get rid of this guy, hover over it, hold down the Control key to get your right. Click on this and come down and you remove Adjustments tab. And it's going to, dialog box is going to come up and say, do you want to remove this? And you say, yes, I do. I want to get rid of that. Now, if somehow, let's just keep going on. The next one over is the local adjustment tool. This is also used for processing files. Now, there's a couple of things in here that I maybe want to use in my shooting sessions, but I'm going to get rid of this tab. We will add any of these things that I feel like I need. I will actually add those someplace else. So I'm going to get rid of the local adjustments as well. Again, hover over it, click on the, hold down the Control key, come down to remove local adjustments and get rid of this guy. The next one over is the Focus tab. Again, these are things that I don't need right now. This is more about processing. So again, hold down the Control key, click and remove the Details tab and get rid of it. The next thing over is the crop. Again, this is processing. This is not what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to click on this. Again, holding down the Control key. I'm going to remove the composition tab and get rid of that guy. The next one over is lens correction. Now this again is something that I would probably use for shooting. However, I made a mistake. I got rid of it. So let's go ahead and get rid of this guy. Hold down the Control key, click, and get rid of the lens tab. And then you say to yourself, oh shit. You know, I'm going to be shooting. I really like to have the lens tab back. The lens tab is where you can actually put in profiles to correct for lens aberration. It's not exactly the same, but you've got the same feature that's in ACR and Camera Raw. But so you need to bring it back. To get it back, hover over an empty area of this screen right here, hold down the Control key, click, and come down to Add Tool tab. And when you do that, you will see these are all the possible tool tabs that you could actually add to this. The ones that are grayed out, it's very hard to see that these are grayed out, but they are. It's because they are already on there. But the one I'm missing is the one that says right here is lens. So if you click on that, you've added the lens tab back onto it. And then again, if you hold down the Command key, you can click and drag this to where it originally resided, right next to the exposure tab. But for our case and for our purposes, I am going to get rid of it again. So again, hold down Control key, click, and remove the lens tab and get rid of that guy. And finally, what I'm left with is exposure right here, which I do want to keep. Color here, which I don't want to keep as far as this part goes. So I'm going to get rid of the color tab as well. Hold down the Control key, click, and remove this as well. Remove the color tab and say OK. So now we've actually modified our workspace. We've done a couple of other things in this guy as well. There is a whole other set of tools that are sitting up here along the top that we can modify as well. And we should probably do that before we save this as our own workspace. So if you come up to the View menu and you come down to Customize Toolbar, it will bring this dialog up. And what you can see is not only did it bring it up, but it actually made this top toolbar. You'll see that there's things around it that actually get circled. You'll see that there's spaces that exist here. Now I'm going to cancel out of this, or I'm going to simply say done. I want you to look at these little boxes right here. These things, what they really do is they're indicating spaces for us. So I'm going to hit done, and you'll see those things actually go away. They're just to indicate that to you. Now, in my case, I don't have a lot of space. If I had a much wider screen, you would actually see this layout more spread out. But again, up to the View menu, down to Customize Toolbar. And when you do that, you will see that you can actually then juggle things here. So for instance, you can take the garbage can and you can actually remove it. You could then say take your exposure warning and bring it over next to your camera. You can move all of this stuff around. You could say, I don't ever use the focus warning. I'm going to get rid of that. I don't use auto adjustments. I'm going to get rid of that. Let's see. I really prefer to have my reset button over here next to my other adjustment buttons over here. You can customize this any way that you want to do it. Unfortunately, this drop-down menu that says you can do icon only, text only, or icon and text, it would be really useful to actually have those things. It's basically saying that if, for instance, it would put underneath this thing that says, this is my exposure warning, it would write under it, exposure warning. It would be really nice to have that. They have never, to my knowledge, ever had text work. Not ever. So this doesn't work, and this doesn't work. And it doesn't work in version 9. And this has been possible to do this since version 3, except it's never worked. Another thing, I would be up the ass of the software engineers so fast with my fist, you cannot imagine it. How do you let this shit either take it out or make it work? Nah, we'll just leave it in. Nobody uses it. Nobody knows it's there. Anyway, if you've changed all this stuff around and you go, oh shit, this doesn't look anything at all like what I remember, I'm really confused now, you simply, if that's happened to you, simply grab the very bottom of these guys. This is the default setting for your toolbar. Drag the entire thing up and let go, and it will give you the original toolbar no matter what you've actually done to it. And then simply hit done. Finally, you need to pick the tool tab that you want to be open when you open up Capture One. So if the library is the one where you always start, you would select the library, make it active. If the camera one is the one that you always select, you want to make it active as well. Now, we have not modified any of the tools in here yet. You would also want to modify all of your tools before we save this as our custom workspace. Is everybody good on this so far? So again, I'm going to select a library because that's usually where I start. We good on this? We're going to save this as a custom workspace. If you come over to the window menu and click on the drop-down menu and come down to Workspace and come over to Save Workspace, you can name it. And in this case, I'm going to name it Verser Tethered 2016, because I've done so many of these, I'm never going to know which one this is. And I'm going to hit Save. To find that workspace, because you can find it and use it, you can actually copy it to a hard drive so that after you've gotten all of this work done, if you simply want to go into a studio and immediately have your workspace available, you can do that. So in order to do that, to find it, we're going to go down to the Finder. Now on these machines, if you guys look in your favorites over here on the side, do you see library in there anywhere? Nope. If you then, well, you guys can't even find the user. Do you have the user, the little house in your favorites? It should say studio. You don't have that either. Okay. Well, we actually need to find the library on this. So in order to find your library, Apple, they hide it. So this is actually Bailey. This is where you're going to go looking for your, Bailey was looking for her monitor profile and couldn't find it. This is how you find it. This is where, well, I'll show you where you find that guy as well. So we need to get to the library. To get to the library, if you simply click on the Go menu, you will see in this drop-down menu, you do not see library. But if you add the Option key, library appears. So go ahead and do this. Go ahead and hold down the Option key. Go, hold down the Option key, click on library, and it will open up your library. And you should have a window now that at the very top it says library, and you should see a folder. You guys all have that? Take that folder and drag it over under your favorite space and let go. And now you will have, it will stay there. Now on these machines, they all reset. But if you do this on your home machine at home, you will always be able to get to your library this way. Make sense? So then if you click on the library and come over to Application Support, and then you want to come down to Capture One, and then inside of Capture One, you will see Workspaces. Inside that workspace, this is all of your custom workspaces. This is where they are. So the one that I am making right now, the Verser Tethered 2016, is right here. if I was going to use this, or if, so this is the one that you would copy, or if you make a number of these, so you can do one for shooting tethered, you can do another one for processing files, you could do a different, so that you've got all of those options, and they change really, really, really fast for you. Does that make sense? So if you're going to use these guys, what you would do, for instance, I'm going to, if you wanted to use these, if you want it on somebody else's machine, you would copy whichever ones that you want to use on this to a jump drive. You would have the jump drive, and then you would simply go to that machine, again, go into the library, application support, Capture One, into workspaces, and simply drag your file in here and relaunch Capture One, and your workspace will then be available to you. Make sense? However, and this is a big however, if you do this, that's great. But you want to, before you leave that job, before the job is over, you would want to go back in here and remove your custom workspaces. You do not want to litter up other studios with your workspace. You don't want to leave those behind on a photographer's, whatever. It's just the idea that you're cleaning up after yourself. Does that make sense? So if you use your custom spaces, that's great. Pretty much every digital tech I know does this. They do, because they do really involve custom workspaces. And it's just much, much faster to set this up, but clean up after yourself when you're gone. Pull that stuff out. By the very same token, if you didn't name your workspace correctly, you wouldn't want to run the risk of putting something in here. For instance, if you saved yours as Capture One 5 workspace, you would overwrite the original one, and that would also be very poor habit. So actually don't get into doing that. Name it with your name, bring it in, use it. When you're done, get it out, and you're good to go. Bailey, for you to find where your profile is for your monitor, it's in this same place. Again, you would come into the library for you in your application support, and then instead of going into, I'm sorry, not application support, let me get back to where I was. So again, you would go into library, and then you would go into Color Sync. Inside Color Sync, there may be different profiles folders right here. Some of them would have it all just as profiles. Some of them, though, your profiles will be all in here, but there'll also be, occasionally, they'll put one in here that'll be monitor. They'll have a monitor profile folder. It will be inside there. But in this case, for mine, my latest one is, for this MacBook right here, is this guy right here. That's the one. So again, you had to use the naming convention when you were generating that profile to know what it is, but this is where you would find it. And then just copy that guy. Although another note about it is that for turning this in for your assignment, there's all you need to know where it is and to go get it. But there is no reason to copy this profile. This is the color calibration profile for this laptop. There would be no reason to copy this to jump drive or for another computer. This has got no meaning or significance at all for another computer. This only matters to this specific laptop right now. Anyway, so that's where it is. So back into Capture One. If you then look at your window, drop-down menu window here, and come into workspaces, you will see that you can also delete workspaces. So you could come up with a delete workspace, and it will come up with a window, and it'll say, which one of these do you want to delete? And the ones that it offers you, it does not allow you to delete workspaces that are the defaults that come with Capture One. So all of these these are all custom workspaces. I could delete any of these guys. However, I'm not going to do that. I am going to go back up to the window, again, back to workspace. If you look at these guys now, you will actually see that there are a set of canned ones that are already available that ship with C1 Pro. Some of these are actually pretty interesting. So for instance, if you look at this simplified tethered Capture One, a lot of people use this one by default. Instead of building the workspace that we just built, they simply will use this one. And if you click on this guy, you'll see that it's not too dissimilar to the one that we did. What it brought back was the focusing tool, and it also brought back the cropping tool. So this would be the tool set that they would use for using for simplified capture. And again, it's a good quick one to go to because it saves. Again, if you're in rush, whatever, it's just a fast way to get to a more simplified workspace. You'll also notice that everything about it is determined. The browser being on the right side is a consequence of this simplified workspace. The simplified tethered capture is set up like this. The fact that the library is the one that comes on by default is, again, saved into this workspace. So the reason I told you that you need to get your screen set up the way you want it to be, everything about it, it's not just the tool tabs, but it's the one that's activated. It's how you view this edge over here, the side over here, the setting that you've got set up in here. All of those issues are remembered in this workspace. So again, you want to have it set up the way you really want it before you actually do this. An interesting one that we also get into here, if you come down, so again, go up to workspace, come down to black and white editing, and you'll see something that very few people have probably ever seen in Photoshop. And it's this guy right here, this little X guy right here. How many people have ever seen the black and white tool tab? That exists inside of Capture One. Why would that matter? You've got an art director who only wants to see the job. Now, the job that you shoot would always be in color unless you're using an apochromatic camera back, which basically is a black and white digital back. Those things do exist. There's actually a Nikon camera that's designed to only shoot black and white as well. But in all other cases, you would actually be shooting color, but art director doesn't want to see color. They want to see it the way that they're actually imagining it. They want to see it in black and white. This is exactly where you would come and actually be able to sort of enable that and to actually have this part set up. If you come back up to that window again, down to workspace again, you will see that you can actually go back to the way it was set up to work with Capture One 7. In Capture One 7, what's going to happen here is that it'll primarily will revert to using Capture One 7's processing engine. That works sometimes and not others. But what a lot of people do is this, and these are the important ones for you guys. Unfortunately, we are not set up here to actually be able to do this, but a dual monitor situation. This is how most people actually set this thing up to work. And in this case, in your dual monitor situation, you can set it up to begin with one of your monitors will hold everything that's right here, and on the other monitor, it will actually give you a large browser. Again, the browsers is all the thumbnails that are on the left-hand side, or the dual monitor, and this is the one most people use. You will still keep your primary monitor looking like it is looking right now, but you'll actually end up then with the second monitor will have a viewer only, and again, that's how most people actually work. But for our case right now, you can either stay with your custom workspace, or let's all get on the same page. Actually, just select the simplified tethered capture. And it should go back and look like this. Okay, there's one final thing that we can talk about tool tabs here really quickly. Actually, I take that back. I'm going to do one other thing here first. All right, so I'm going to leave the library tool tab alone as it is right now, but I want you to click on the camera tool tab. Now, in the camera tool tab, the way this thing is actually set up, some of it would be typical, the way that you guys would actually have this thing set up to work. Some of these things I don't necessarily think I actually use. So for instance, I don't really use exposure evaluation. So again, if you click on one of these images right now to make one active, you'll see that you get exposure evaluation. You get, basically, it's the histogram is what you're getting. How many people in this room really work with a histogram when you're doing exposure? Are you the histogram kind of people? No, for the most part, if you're like me, you're actually using a color card and all of this. You're using that color card to really give you evaluation for your exposure. That's not the kind of thing that you would actually be using. So if you wanted more screen real estate, if you wanted to have more in here so that you could actually see, get these guys up a little bit bigger and see, you know, actually have more room to work with, or better yet, if you wanted to add some other tool here that you use when you actually are using the camera, you can modify everything that's in here. So to modify everything that's in here, if you click on this little three-ring guy, this little drop down, it's the three little dots that are over here, you'll notice that every single one of these has actually got that. There's one right here. There's also a question mark that's next to these guys. If you click on the question mark, it will actually, you have to be online to do this, but it will take you to phase one's site, and it will explain exactly what exposure evaluation is. It'll show you. So it's essentially how you get to that specific thing on the online manual. And you'll notice pretty much everything has those. Some of the things don't, like this next capture location. It does not have an explanation. That's not talked about in the manual, but next capture adjustments is, well, we will again get to this thing in greater detail. But if you want to get rid of this guy, you click on the 3 dots that are right next to it, and you can come down and click on it and go remove tool, and it gets rid of it. To bring the tool back, you would hover down in this bottom area down here, hold down the control key and click, and you can now add tool. And you can add any available tool. It does not have to be one that Phase thinks should be in the camera tool tab. It can be any one that you actually want. Now, in our case, it was exposure evaluation. That's the one that we actually got rid of. So you can bring that. You will see that exposure evaluation comes back. If you click on the top of exposure evaluation, I'm clicking right next to the name in the top part, you can actually drag it back up and place it exactly where it was at the top. You could place it in the middle if you wanted to do that. You can simply just drop it in the middle. All of these are eminently placeable. You can even take these and drag them outside of the tool tab, and they will still stay active. Make sense? However, I'm going to get rid of this one again because I don't use it in my when I'm looking at my camera. So again, I'm going to hold down the control key. I'm going to click down, and I'm going to remove that tool. However, there is a tool that I use all the time in this capture in the camera setting here, and it is the focus tool. So I'm going to add that to my tool tab right now. So again, if you hold down the control key, click down in the space down at the bottom, come over to Add Tool, and you want to look for Focus. And it will bring up the Focus tool, and you can see now that I've got the Focus tool. I can actually click on the little Focus tool icon at the bottom, and for instance, I can click and check to see his eyes, whether they're in focus or not, or the Color Tool tab to see whether that's or not. You will also notice that the tools in here become dynamic. So for instance, when the focus tool actually opened up, it collapsed my camera tool tab. It didn't get rid of it, it just collapsed it. If I click to open that guy back up again, you will notice that it collapses capture naming and capture location, but it keeps focus open, and I can actually see my camera guy right now. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, so one of the great tricks that you can do as a digital tech is you can go in and say to the photographer, would you like me to make your own custom tool tab for you? And he'll go, what do you mean? Or she'll go, what do you mean? And you'll say, well, you know, we can configure all of these to anything that we want, but I can also give you your custom one. And they go, really? And you go, yes. If you hover over this space up here in the tool tab part and hold down the control key again and click to get a drop down, you can come down to the Add Tool tab. Now, we've already talked about this before. We already said, you know, you remember we got rid of lens and we could add it again. But down here at the very bottom is Custom Tool tab. And when that happens, it opens up and you could type in what it is. So I'm going to just call this Versor's Tool tab, or Versor. And then you can pick from a series of icons. Now, these are really imaginative icons, so I don't know. I'm going to put in, because I think I'm a star, so I think I'll put in the star icon. That's the one I'll use. I wouldn't use the one that looks like the sun. That looks too much like the processing tool to me. Or, yes, I'm the slave working guy, so I'm going to put in the hammer one. Or you could put in any of these numbered ones right here. Yeah, what's my favorite number? Let's see, 7, because it's a prime number. So I'm going to be 7, right? And I'm going to add the tool tab, and you'll see that you now get a custom tool tab that's on the top. It's completely blank. You can then simply hold down the control key and click in the space underneath it and start adding whatever tools that you want to add to actually do this. So let's say that I wanted to build I don't know, what the fuck am I going to build? I'm going to build stuff that only deals with color. So I'm going to add the color balance tool. and then I'm going to click on the Add tool again. I'm going to add the Color Editor tool, and then I'm going to click on the another one again, and I'm going to add the Lens Correction tool. And you can just keep going on and on and on and add and build your own custom menu. You're not restricted to a single one of these. You can actually click and do this again. So again, add tool tab, come down to the next one, whatever, and add another one. And this can keep going on. You start doing this kind of work for somebody, they realize how deep your knowledge of this program is. You're showing off. But it's a great trick, right? Okay, I'm going to get rid of my custom tool tab now that I've actually done this. I'm simply going to, again, hold down the control key, click on this, and I'm going to actually remove the Versor tab. Damn. Yes, gone. Okay. Shoot.
So in a situation where you can load your own custom workspace,
Yes.
or they don't want you to, there is time to, would you use this as a viable way of just quickly creating a path with all the stuff that you want there?
Sure, you could easily do that. But you can, again, you can also customize any of your tool tabs just like we did. Typically, instead of doing a new one for me, what I do literally is I go in and I did exactly what I just showed you on the camera tab. I add the focus to it, and I get rid of the exposure evaluation, because the exposure evaluation, again, if you imagine in my situation, imagine shooting on white. I do it all the time. Well, the exposure evaluation, the histogram, it's always an indication that I'm overexposed, always, because I've got my screen is being dominated by white. So my histogram is all jammed to the right-hand side. It gives me this whole big warning, oh, you're overexposed, you're overexposed, you're overexposed. And it isn't overexposed. It's just that there's a lot of white that's in my image. My subjects are perfectly exposed, so it's a worthless tool for me. Now, that's just me. There's other people who might feel differently about that. You know, the landscape photographer might look at that in a completely different fashion, right? So typically, I customize the tool tabs themselves. It's faster than building a brand new one from scratch. But either way, you see it's pretty quick. Yeah, so yeah, that's how I would actually deal with it. Okay, so we talked about that, how to get to your user library. Custom tool tab, we got through that. Command key, move it, we got through that. Okay. Okay, let's go back into the library really quick, and we're going to actually start here. So there is some confusion about what goes on in this, and we need to talk about this confusion in a big way right now. And it's this. So we're going to start at the top. Now, unlike your all's machines, in my machine, when I get this drop-down menu, I actually do get the other sessions that are possible for me. In your case, you're not getting those, so you would actually have to navigate to those sessions. So for instance, let's say I'm shooting, I got all one done, then I click and I want to go to sessions 2, and then I would start shooting in session 2, and then I can go back to, you know, into 3 and blah, 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 and on and on and on like that, whatever. So that's this drop-down menu right here. I'm going to go back to 1. We also talked about this drop-down little guy right here, the drop-down menu. This is where you can create a new session or a new catalog. Again, if you click on this online help, it'll take you to the library and talk about that. But what I want to talk about is these guys right here. Now, by default, these are set to refer to the folders that we just set up. So again, if you go out to the Finder, so I need everybody to come out to the Finder again, find the folder that you're actually looking at right here. Inside that session folder, there's a capture folder, an output folder, selects, and a trash folder. These 4 things right here actually, once this thing is initially set up, refer to those folders. And if you hover over if you select it and hover over it, you'll see you get this drop-down path that shows you where it actually is. However, this is really critical and important to know. These are aliases that can be redirected to something else. This does not have to be this capture folder. It does not have to be this one right here. It can actually be a different folder entirely. So what is confusing, I think, about this is that everybody looks at this and says, okay, well, Versor's in session 1. This is the capture folder in session 1, and that's true by default, but you can change this. you can change what will be the capture folder. And to see what that looks like, if you come down to the very bottom, you will see where you've got here, not the very, very bottom. Filters should be at the very bottom of your thing. I just collapsed filters by clicking on it. You should have system folders. Do you guys see that? Click on systems folders to open it up, and you should see the 2 hard drives. They should exist right here. You should also see one that says Studio. Do you see that? If you click on the drop down to Studio, it's just a faster way to get to the picture folder. You can actually click, there actually will be Verser is actually sitting here right now. If we click and come down to the pictures folder, which is right here, you can click and come down to this. You will actually see down in there that we've actually got the parent session folder. It's this 20161015. If you click on that, this guy will open up. If you then click on the session 1, it will open up as well. And inside session 1, you will see that there's the capture, output, selects, and trash folder. You will also notice that there's a little bitty icon that's sitting right next to it. To the capture folder, it is actually the camera icon. Output is the little gear. Selects is the little arrow. And then trash is the trash. If you then click on the second session that's right underneath it and open it, you will notice that none of these are selected, that the capture folder here is not selected, that this is not, it doesn't have these little icons. You can change that. If you hover over the capture folder of the second session, hold down the control key and click and then say that you want to set as capture folder, this will change. What will happen now is that this is now the capture folder. This thing has been changed to a favorite. However, if you go up here and look at the top, you will see that even though I'm in session 1 up here, this capture folder is no longer the capture folder of session 1. Does this make sense? This can get to be really confusing. You'll also notice if you hover over this guy that it will, then again, I can't use my mouse to point this out, but it's telling you right here that, yep, this is in session 2. This is now the capture folder that is in session 2, not the one that was in the session shot 01. Does that make sense what's going on here? That's also why you can't see anything that's actually in here. You don't see any of the thumbnails anymore because these, what I'm saying is I want you to show me the images that are in that folder, and there aren't any in there because this is pointing to the capture folder of my shot number 2, not my shot number 1. Does that make sense what's going on here? To get back to that, to get it back to the old way, come back to the original capture folder. Again, hold down the control key, click on this, and come out to set as capture folder. And you will see that it's now also got a little heart next to it, but it's also returned to the capture folder, and your images have showed up again. That little heart is to indicate that it's automatically been put in this folder, in the session's favorite, which I find to be a really annoying thing because I've got 2 favorites in here. They're both called capture. They're both talking about 2 different folders, and I have no idea which one they are. So if you want to get rid of these session favorites, you can simply click on one and hit the minus button, and you can click on another one and hit the minus button again. Now you don't see anything, and it's because you have not selected your capture folder. Does that make sense? You can do the exact same thing for setting your selects folder, your output folder, and your trash. While we are talking about this, trash is a 2-step process. Actually, I may be getting ahead of myself, so hold on. Oh, yeah, we should talk about this right now. So when we initially set this guy up, we actually set it up. Go ahead and do a new session for me right now. We're not actually going to build one, but I want to get that dialog box open again. And it's going to start out with untitled. And again, you have location where you can actually put this. So I'm going to click on my location, my drop down. And in most cases, the way most studios are set up, again, you would pick this shared folder to actually do this to, because this share folder is common and accessible to everybody no matter what they log into. If not, the default for Capture One is always the picture folder of the user that you have logged in as. That's actually a really good place to have it. What's the worst place that you could put this folder? Why? It does work more slowly, but why? Do we know? Go ahead, Alicia. I thought that was, I know. This is what happens. The desktop, the way the desktop functions is the desktop is charged with constantly being up to date. It needs to always know exactly what should be on it, what shouldn't be on it, what's visible, what's not visible. So it is constantly refreshing itself. If you are shooting to the desktop, you are constantly adding files to it, and it's constantly having to refresh itself with that additional file set. And it becomes hugely burdensome, and it will bring your computer to an absolute crawl. So that is not a place to actually do it. Pictures is actually a very good place to do it because Pictures usually is located on the internal hard drive of your computer. That is going to be the fastest place that you can go. You can shoot to an external hard drive, but you've got to realize that an external hard drive has got to go through whatever bus that you're being connected to, how it's being connected. So if you're using USB 2, that would be the slowest connection. So if you've got a USB 2 external hard drive, you can shoot to it, but it is an extremely slow process, and that slowness will be reflected in how fast you can actually shoot and get previews in Capture One. So the fastest, without hesitation, is going to be an internal hard drive because of your internal hard drives are connected directly to your circuit board in the fastest bus that there is. Now, there can be different speeds of hard drives in your computer. So for instance, I've pulled the typical hard drive in this computer out and I've replaced it with an SSD. Again, we've talked about SSDs in this class, right? SSD stands for solid state drive. It is a drive that's made up of RAM chips. It's all electronic. There are no moving parts in it. It's as fast as you can get inside your computer. The second fastest that you can get inside your computer is actually a mechanical hard drive. It spins. Again, it's on the bus inside of your computer, but it's mechanical. There's 3 different speeds of hard drives. There's a 10,000 RPM hard drive, which is very fast. It's the fastest. It's very rare. You don't see them, and they're very expensive. You're probably better off using an SSD because, again, a really fast hard drive is probably prone to failing as well because it's spinning so fast. SSDs are safer because there's nothing moving in them. If they do fail, and they will fail, all hard drives will fail, but an SSD is probably a little bit more fault tolerant than a mechanical hard drive. So anyway, the 10,000 RPM one is the fastest. 5,400 RPM is the one every single laptop in the world ships with. It is the slowest of hard drives. And then finally, you get one in the middle. It's a 7,200 RPM hard drive. You can actually replace them. So before SSDs, everybody I know replaced all of their internal hard drives, which were spinning at 5,400 RPMs per second, with ones that are spinning at 7,200 RPMs per second. So, but again, SSD would be the faster route. So once you max out, or that takes care of what's inside the fastest route. The next possibilities that you've got are external. So you have different speeds of external connections. So in theory, the fastest of the external connections is Thunderbolt. They've now come out with Thunderbolt 3, I'm fairly certain. And Thunderbolt 3 now does, well, I can quote you speeds. All the speeds that are quoted are they're specs, but they're not real world speeds. It's like they tell you on the modem that you're on your internet connection in your house that, oh, it's capable of downloading, you know, of 40 terabytes a second. And you like try to upload a terabyte file or download a terabyte file, and it takes more than a second. I mean, your mileage may vary, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, in theory, Thunderbolt 3 would be the fastest of them all. Thunderbolt 2 would be the next fastest, although USB 3 starts to get into the very same range as is around Thunderbolt 1, Thunderbolt 2, those somewhere in those specs. In that area is where you find USB 3. USB is shockingly fast, given how cheap it is and how available it is. So I actually think, although Apple continues to put out Thunderbolt, and the reason they do it is because it's an Intel invention, and Intel continues to support it. And at some day, some way, someplace, whatever, it actually might be viable but it's having a really hard time getting off the ground, whereas USB 3 is becoming ubiquitous everywhere. It's shockingly fast, but again, everything has to be USB 3. It has to be a USB 3 drive, it has to be a USB 3 cable, and your computer has to be able to read USB 3. So you can use a USB 3 drive on a computer like mine that only reads USB 2, but you will not get the USB 3 speeds, you only get the USB 2 ones. So that would be the next one down the list. Then FireWire 800 is the next fastest. Then FireWire 400 and USB 2 are roughly the same speed. And then finally, down at the very bottom would be USB 1. The one connection that we have not talked about is eSATA. This is actually an eSATA drive. This is what an external eSATA looks like. What an eSATA actually means is the connection of your bus inside your computer is called SATA. It's SATA. There are 3 versions of SATA. There's 1, 2, and 3. They are all one started out at being able to transfer 1.5 gigabytes a second. 2 can do 3 gigabytes per second, I think, and 3 can now do 6 gigabytes per second. They just keep doubling is what's happening. It is the fastest speed you can get because the bus is connected directly to your motherboard. You're going straight into your motherboard. There really is, they call it a bus, but there is no, it's just connected. It goes right into your processor. That's SATA on the inside. You can actually have external SATA. So you can't do it on a laptop like this, but you can do it on a tower. And what happens in a tower is you can actually plug a cable right into your motherboard that you then snake outside of your case, and you can plug this drive into it. The E for eSATA simply stands for external. If you do that, this then becomes the fastest connection that you can do to your computer, because this works just like connecting directly to your motherboard on the inside. There are people that make cards for this. You can actually get a card. There's some laptops that actually you can put a card in that will also take an eSATA connection like this. You plug into this. Again, it's faster than anything. It will be faster than any Thunderbolt will ever be because it is not, it's plugging directly into the motherboard. The downside to doing that for an external like this is that you have to, SATA cabling does not provide power. So FireWire will supply power to this. USB will supply power. If this was a USB external, can supply power to it. With eSATA, you have to have a power brick that you're plugging into, so it's completely different. It's not the end all to get all. Does that sort of make sense? So the reason this matters is that, again, your hard drive, your external hard drive speed, if that's what you've set this thing up to do, if you're saying, yep, I want to go to the external hard drive on this, that's what you want to shoot tethered to, that speed of that bus is going to control how fast your shooting can actually happen. How fast are you seeing those previews come up on your screen when you're actually shooting? And if all of a sudden it's really slow, it's probably because you were going out to a really slow hard drive and you're doing it through a slow connection. If you want that to go faster, you should move the capture folder that you're actually shooting to, that you're setting up right here. You should move it to the internal drive of your computer and shoot to that, and then copy those files over to an external drive later. But you will get much better performance. Does that make sense? John, you had a question?
I'm taking this a little bit farther for like home network setup. So
yes.
If you have some sort of server setup.
That's going to be my last thing. So let me finish the last part and then answer your question, okay? So external hard drive would be you would think the bottom of the list, but there is another possibility. And John just mentioned that. You can actually, conceivably, you can to a server. The problem with that, though, is the network connection and how reliable is your network connection, how secure is that connection, and how fast is your network. So if you are going to shoot to a server, which is indeed a possibility, you have definitely got to troubleshoot that beforehand. That is something that if you've got a photographer who says, yeah, I want to shoot to this server, you say to them, I got to come in a day before then we shoot and make sure that this is going to work. And you've got to get it all connected and you've got to start banging it out. The strongest of the server connections will be wired. That would be Ethernet. That would be the most secure of them. You could do it conceivably wirelessly. That would be the ultimate, slowest, most problem-ridden one that you're liable to get. I mean, you guys know what it's like here, trying to work off the wireless network here. All of a sudden it goes out. Well, if that happens, you lose the connection to the folder that you're trying to shoot to. Nightmare. Did that answer your question?
My question is more along the lines of the speed difference
Yes.
between, I guess, what's the fastest, Cat 9 or 6 or something?
Cat 6 is the fastest of the Ethernets, and if you've got the right equipment for it, you're actually capable of gigabit Ethernet. So Ethernet comes in 3 different speeds. It comes in 10 megabytes per second, 100 megabytes per second, and 1,000 megabytes per second, and 1,000 megabytes is a gigabyte. So if you're going to do it, you need, just like John said, and here, I'll show you. Ethernet cables, there's 3 different flavors of them. Again, all of this matters to you guys as digital techs. You've got to know this shit. You've got to write this shit down. Every Ethernet cable in the world looks the same, but they're not the same. This is an Ethernet cable right here. If you look at the side of the cabling on this, it's always got something printed on it. This one that's got printed on it, this is a Cat 5e. It's the same. A Cat 5e is capable of gigabyte internet speed. A Cat 5 without the E, the E stands for enhanced, without the E is not capable of gigabyte speed. So if you've got a gigabyte server and you've got a gigabyte switch and a gigabyte computer, and this, all the most recent Macs are all gigabyte Ethernet capable, but you use a Cat 5, not a 5e on it, you will only get 100 megabytes per second transfer speed. You will essentially cut you get only 10% of the potential of your setup. There is also a Cat 6, which is a beefier version of this Cat 5e. It's no faster, but most people, when they go to buy Ethernet cables, simply will buy the Cat 6. It gets away. The 5e thing got confusing, and I think that's part of why they did it. So all of that matters. But remember this, that the slowest thing in your network will do all of your network that way. So if you've got a computer that's gigabyte capable, a server that's gigabyte capable, say you've got a switch that you're using or a router that you're using, it's also gigabyte capable, whatever, but you use Cat 5 cables, you will only get that slower non-gigabyte speed. If, by the very same token, you've got all Cat 6 cables and the computer's right, but the switch you've got is not gigabyte compatible. It's only, again, 100 megabytes instead of 1,000. Then, again, your transfer is going to be slowed down there. So you've got to make sure that everything in the chain is capable of gigabyte internet speeds, transfer speeds, or it doesn't matter. The rest of it doesn't make any difference.
So as far as like the external hard drive is concerned, but something that stays at your workstation, not
Yeah.
something that's mobile.
Yeah.
What kind of would you connect it with a sort of solution that runs off of Cat 5e or 6 or Thunderbolt or USB 3? Like what?
A direct connection is always going to be faster, so either Cat 6 would work, but typically you will find that Thunderbolt, USB 3, whatever, are going to be way faster than an internet connection. And servers, as a rule, writing to them are shockingly slow. Most of them are painfully slow. So on my desktop, the way I've got mine configured, again, I don't shoot to my desktop because it's in my office. The way I've got this one configured, I shoot to the internal on this guy, and then I copy the files over to an external hard drive. If you were going to shoot to your desktop, or if you're going to wheel your desktop around, again, I would do the very same trick. If you wanted to shoot to it, to an external, then again, the faster the speeds, the better you're going to be. So again, where does Ethernet fall in that? It depends on the flavor of Ethernet that you've got. I would say that probably the fastest of the Ethernets works somewhere in the range of that FireWire 800, maybe USB. It can approach a USB 3 speed, maybe not. You'd have to try that out. It's going to be all dependent on how fast are the drives that you're using in your box, how fast are they spinning, are they solid state, all of those issues. I mean, it's easy to test. Yes?
Did you ever shoot to like the Dropbox folder, which is on your computer, but then like file it as you're shooting?
No, I would not. Again, what you're taxing the computer with at that point is you're saying, I want you to, your Dropbox is actually in the cloud. It exists on your screen, but it's also in the cloud. So it's sending it up there right away. And I would be nervous that the Dropbox application itself is struggling with continuing to write the information that you're writing as you're shooting and getting that information pushed out. And how long a line can that go for before things start to break down? I would just be really nervous about doing that.
There's no like instant backup.
As far as that part goes, there is. Well, I take that back. It's a really interesting point. When you are shooting in Capture One, there is no way that you can effectively back up at the same time into two separate boxes. What you can do is you can connect to an external RAID. Again, that's what I showed you guys before, what I've got right here, and this is how I shoot. So when I'm actually shooting, I don't shoot to my internal hard drive. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but as a rule, I will shoot to this guy. This is a RAID, and what's inside of this is two of these. This is a mirrored array. So what's happening is, again, mirrored again, it's protected. So this is a 0, 1. If one of these hard drives fails, there's complete intact copy of all my files on the other hard drive. So, however, this is not a viable backup because if somebody comes along and steals this, I've lost it all. A viable backup would protect against that. If this is in my office and if my office burns down, I lose everything. So this is not a viable backup in and of itself. But what this will do is it will give me 2 copies of my file as I'm shooting. So when I shoot to this thing, it's doing 1 copy on one of the hard drives, 1 copy on the other. However, it's mirrored, so it's slower than just a regular hard drive will be. So that's going to have an impact on how fast I can shoot and how fast Capture One can actually handle these things. Because that's what's really going on, is how fast. Now, all of these cameras have buffers, and I'm sure, have you guys ever seen when you're actually shooting, there's a little counter that sits in, I know it's true for Canons, and I know it's true for Phase, so I've got to believe it's true for Nikons as well. Inside, you'll see information inside your viewfinder, and usually what you see is the some sort of scale to actually show you exposure. You will also see usually shutter speed and aperture, right? And then there's another number. Right? Let's turn on the camera. Let's just see if it doesn't work. I think it'll work. Because again, you guys should know, you need to know all about this. So if you look inside the camera and just turn it on, you don't have to put a lens on it. Just turn it on. Let's see. Let me just look in here to see. Yeah. And this, if you look in the Canons anyway, you get exactly what I just told you. You've got a shutter speed and aperture, but you see if you look all the way to the right, there's a series of brackets with a number in it. Now see that? That's actually the buffer in your camera. So what happens is this. Your camera actually has memory, just like a computer does in it. And when you start to shoot, the frames that you're shooting load into that buffer. So as you're shooting, you will actually watch that number go down. And it can go all the way down to 1 if you shoot really, really fast. That buffer then actually sends that information to Capture One. And it's when the file then gets written to the hard drive that you're shooting to in Capture One, it then frees up that space in the buffer. So what happens is that if you shoot slow enough, that buffer never fills up. The camera buffer never fills up. All of it will be sent to Capture One. Capture One will be fine. But if you go too fast, what will end up happening is the buffer will hit 0. It'll say you can't, and your camera will just stop. You won't be able to shoot anymore. That's not a point to panic. That's not a point to unplug anything. That's merely saying you need to give time for the buffer to write to your computer. And you will slowly watch that number creep up again. So a lot of photographers who shoot really fast, what you'll end up seeing is they'll bottom out on the buffer will completely fill. They'll have to stop. They will wait. They won't, because it zeroes out. If you then get to, the buffer will start to unload. If you get to like 1 or 2 and you start to shoot again right away, it'll buffer out right away really quickly, and photographers get really frustrated. So you've got to let the buffer completely unload. Let it write all the way to to Camera Raw again. You will then reach the point where the buffer reads. Typically the buffer on mine is 13. That's the maximum that it can hold, which makes me nervous because I just saw 49 on that camera that you've got there, Ben,
Yeah.
which makes me believe that that thing's possibly set up to shoot JPEG and not RAW files. Oh, shit. Can't believe that's happened. All right, troubleshoot question. You're shooting a gray card. You got your gray card out, and you do an exposure, and you look at it, and you say, "Oh my God, I'm gonna stop under." And you go to color correct, and it appears like color's fine. So then you open up a stop, or you crank your power packs up a stop, and you shoot another frame, and it doesn't look like a thing has changed. Nothing has changed. What's wrong? No, you're getting images. So what? Possible. No, because that would happen on your first frame as well. Yeah, no, that would happen. Yes, I guess that is a possibility. Auto ISO, your camera's trying to make an adjustment for that. Anybody else? There's a good chance that you're set to shoot JPEG. JPEGs are all processed inside of your camera. So what ends up coming into Capture One is a processed file. And JPEG, your camera is trying to make adjustments to that, just like your Auto ISO. It's trying to say, oh, well, this is a stop underexposed. I need to add a stop, or I'm going to process it and add a stop, or whatever. It's trying to make it so if you're shooting JPEG and you're in the studio and you're changing power settings, more times than not, what you end up getting will be all the files will continue to look identical no matter what you're changing, because the processor inside of your camera is trying to make adjustments for what you're changing. So when you're adding a stop, it's trying, when it processes, it's saying, well, that's wrong. I'm going to underexpose it. I'm going to process it under a stop. So it tries to keep it the very same place all the time. Does that make sense? So it's just running average and auto on everything. So at any rate, it would be a thing to suspect. Was that set to?
Yeah, that was like
Okay, then. No, but another great trick. All of a sudden, you open a camera up and you look at it and you check and you say, what should the buffer really be? Again, for most Canons, it's 13. It'll hold 13 images. For Nikons, I don't know what the value is, but probably pretty close. But all of a sudden, you see a 49 in there. The alarm bell should be going off. Okay. All right, let's see. Is that really 5 after? Okay. I'm going to skip where we're supposed to be going next right now because I want to talk about something else really quick. We don't have a time to get into this other part too deep. So I'm going to cancel out of all of this. So let's say that C1 Pro starts acting really wonky. It's not doing things that it's supposed to do. One of the things that happens, and it's happened since Capture One 6, it's still happening in 9 now to my knowledge, is this. You will actually be working with the white balance tool, which is this tool right up here, and all of a sudden you'll be working on your image, and instead of the white balance tool, you only get the hand, and you cannot get rid of the hand. When you come back to the white balance tool, it will still be the hand. You cannot get rid of it. Your only solution at that point is to quit Capture One and restart. If you do quit Capture One and restart, 9 times out of 10 at least, it will actually reset for you. But there are other things that can happen that it will not reset for you. And so you have to reset the preferences of Capture One. So I'm going to show you all how to do it. You're going to do this with me. We're going to do it the wrong way first. So if you come into the Finder, again, you need to get to the library again. So you need to remember that trick, because if you're working on some other studio machine or some other photographers and they don't know how to get to the library, or the library is not, we don't have it here, because by default, this does not, by default, you're not supposed to see this. But anyway, you would go to the library, and then instead of going to application support, you need to come down to preferences. When you get into the preference folder, I simply double click to get my screen, to get this column to be, and I always use column view. If you're using this would be the icon view, which it's worthless, I'd never use it. This is a list view, which occasionally makes sense to use. I personally like the column view because it really gives me the tree that lets me know where I'm going. So I know I'm in the library folder, in the preferences folder. These are the preferences right now. To get this thing, you see all these names are truncated. and that becomes really difficult then to know what they really mean. So to get this as wide as it needs to be, you can simply double click on this two-headed line, the two lines at the bottom. If you do that really fast, it'll make it as wide as it needs to be to see the whole thing. Then you need to scroll down, and what you are looking for, and preferences are weird. Some preferences are set up. You'll see Adobe actually puts in whole folders worth of them. But most people, they actually start with this COM dot. And you'll see, as you're scrolling down in this, even Apple does a lot of them. So you'll see a lot of Adobe ones that way. Even Apple does this guy as well, which for me is a little bit frustrating. It's almost like having the extension at the beginning instead of at the end, but I don't design the software. So at any rate, what you're looking for is any and everything that is com.phase. So scroll down. And when you get close, you will see this. Now, in this also, you will see, if I keep scrolling down, that there's quite a few things in here. But what you should see just happening right now, I just saw this, is that one of these just appeared and then just disappeared. So and it just happened again right there. Did you see, is that happening on your alls? This is the major caveat and the major screw up when you're trying to reset preferences. To reset your preferences, you have to quit Capture One. If you do not quit Capture One, this leave behind one preference will continue to plague you. It will, you don't really know that you have gotten rid of it or not, because it appears and then it doesn't appear, and then it appears and then it doesn't appear again. So that's the behavior. You will also see in here that I've actually got preferences for Capture One 7. You have to trash all of them. So again, you would quit Capture One and then trash every single preference that has got that word phase 1 in it. Then you also have to empty the trash. You cannot leave them in the trash. You've actually got to empty them. If you are nervous, and there's a good reason to be nervous, because this will reset your computer back to scratch, right? Back to square one. When you launch Capture One, it's going to ask to be reactivated again. And if you are not online, you can't reactivate it again. So let's say you're out in the field and you do this. And so you're out in the field, it's acting really wonky on you. You go in, you take the preferences out, you put them in your trash, and you throw it away. And then you start Capture One up again, and it says, we need your activation code. And you go, I'm out in the middle of nowhere, I can't do that. A better move for you would have been to copy those preferences to an external drive or to a jump drive, just in case. So that if it all goes south like this, I would much rather be working with a Capture One program that maybe wasn't giving me my white balance tool, but I could still work with it, than not at all. So if that's the case, you could then go right back into this very same place, pull out the new preferences that were created, copy the old ones that you had copied to your external hard drive or to your jump drive back into place, and you should be good to go.
You also wirelessly tether to your cell phones.
Which is exactly the next part that I'm going to go to right here. Does everybody know that you can actually wirelessly connect to your cell phone? Does anybody not know this? All right. Then I don't need to show you how to do it. Okay. I am going to stop things, I think. Hang on one second. Sarah, tethered burn. Oh. Yeah, this doesn't come up anymore. So we're not going to deal with that part of it. You should know this. Everybody really quickly, well, let me see. I actually may have a version of C17. I need to show you this. Just, you guys keep yours open. Let me see if I've got a copy of C17, because there's one other thing I need to talk to you about in this really quickly. Yep, I do. In C17, go ahead and, if you will, open your new session dialog box for me one more time, because I'm going to show you the difference that we've actually got going here. This is 7. 6 was the same way. And the reason I bring this up is that you may actually get to a studio that's still using an old piece of software. Bonton to this day uses C17, although I think they're upgrading right now. But you'll notice the difference in this. You still got name, you still got location. This guy right here that says tethered or untethered, you had the option in the old days to actually set this. And the reason this was set differently would be if you were going to shoot tethered, that seems pretty obvious. However, if you were simply importing images, people would say you would go to untethered. Now you'll notice when I just changed that to untethered, it also got rid of my capture folder, which I think is confusing. Because then when I go to import this, it's going to ask me where I want to do the import, which would be right here. But I don't have a capture folder to actually put this in, even though it's going to create the session. So it's just going to dump it inside the parent folder of the session. It just does, this does not seem good to me. But what is even worse about this is that if you build a session and you label this as untethered, you can never connect a camera to this. No matter what, you will see the camera window will show up. It'll be right there, big as life, but you will never be able to connect to this. So this became, apparently, in my opinion, so dangerous that they eliminated this in C1 Pro 8 and 9. You don't have these options anymore. But I just wanted you guys to be aware of this, that if you go into a studio, if this exists, you would always leave this as tethered, even if you're going to be importing files using a card reader or something that way, because you still then would have the folder to import those images into. This would still just be much, much, much better. Make sense? Okay, so we are going to stop there. Are there questions about all this? So we have just started the beginning part of this. Next week, we will dive so deep into the library, your head will spin. But that's a good thing. And I'll see you guys then. Do me a favor. Yeah. For you guys, Ned and Bailey both, I was charging the batteries in the camera. We went through all of that. So just pack all that gear back up. I wanted people have mixed all this shit up. It's just what they've done with these cameras is ridiculous. Oh, and see the same thing. So just put it all back in. I think that's all I'm saying.
You want us to delete the
Yeah, and delete those working files. If you, hopefully you copied them over to your computer, and if you would, just delete those working files from the desktop or wherever they are on those computers. That'd be great. And so guys, when we show up next week, hey guys, when we show up next week, it's going to be exactly the same thing. I need you to grab a computer and camera. We will actually use the camera next week.
Class 9 to 12.
Free after 12 minutes.
Yeah, but I'm not free till 3. What? I was saying, if you were gonna shoot with us, you're not, well, you're semi. I have to.
Yeah, so
Just send me an email telling you that, and we'll get to it.
I mean, you got.
mostly that's set up. Yeah, no, yeah. Print it out. So if you print out like the colors.
I don't know what
And like put it
in case you want to. I feel like Fridays, you could do Friday, Saturday.
yeah.
That's what I'm doing today. I'm doing project.
So that's the three of us.
Yeah. We can do one day.
Like a 320.
Yeah, between that and center. You want to do today? All right.
So we're meeting. We'll
Yeah.
meet up here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, you want to do your
Yeah.
Oh, I would have two cables.
Yeah, I'll do this.
You've got a FireWire, because these in the back takes those. You've got FireWire and you so you should have two.
you have projector versus?
That'd be great.
It's in exactly the same place. And in fact, if you make it outside, like, instead of doing it in the front room, if you make it outside, put it in that same spotlight, you'll find it. So, it should, yeah, it should be there. Same day.
I have a scare.
Sometimes, like, people just need to be down here.
I have the last set of yes.
Okay.
If you want to take a picture of them. They're a little bit spotty because it was for our outdoor shooting. So I tried to write down.
What groups,
Wait, so, are you? Yeah. You're gonna screw me over.
Hey, did everybody get on the sign-in sheet?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I think it's So with Alicia's schedule, it seems like she's the only odd man out. Is it okay if we do it late and just try to do it with 2 people?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's not impossible to do with 2 people. But
Because I
just-
heard it was impossible to do with 3.
No.
so-
You can be less ambitious about it if that happens. So, for instance,
Well, I just wasn't there at all, so like, I'm gonna have to really rely on you. Which, as long as you're confident in that, that's fine.
when are you guys going to try and do this?
It's all up to her.
Yeah,
It'll
you're gonna try
either
to do
be Saturday after this class or
Uh-huh.
Sunday, whichever day the weather is better.
Okay.
Because I'm busy all week next
No,
week.
I got it. So this is going to be next weekend.
Yeah.
Okay, this one you're going to try to do
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
Okay. Are you feeling pretty good about
Doing
knowing?
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
you'll be fine. You can cheat. I'll let you guys cheat because there's only going to be 3 of you. So, for instance,
Well, 2.
no, 2 of us.
It's okay.
It's a problem, right? Yeah, I mean, okay, so using the scrim, using the overhead reflector is not going to be that difficult. It's just you need something to shoot, right? And so, for instance, one of you is going to hold one thing, one would actually be holding the other to actually do that
We
whole
could
part
also
of it.
bring a friend. Maybe.
Bring a friend. There you go.
I can ask CJ because I'm
Or
supposed to
Bryce.
be.
We'll go.
I'm supposed to be going out of town at 5 anyway. So if he drives down,
So we're doing Friday.
Perfect.